Yeah, right now we have Alexander Wilczek, and he's going to share with us behind the curtain of the dark web and cyber crime operations.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Alexander.
Thank you. Yeah, I second that sentiment. Thank you very much for coming. Hopefully you didn't hit it too hard, and hopefully my voice will last this presentation. So yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Alexander Wilczek. I've been 10 plus years in cybersecurity. Have a background in penetration testing. That's what I kind of got into in the industry with. Passions research-wise include dark web, Web3, so your blockchain kind of stuff, the security around that. Personally, I'm passionate about privacy. The proud founder of Rivernorth. And a little fun fact about myself, I've been living as a digital nomad for the last 2.5 years and building Rivernorth along the way. So I have a little funny picture for you, hopefully like this place. So yeah, bit of outback hacking. This has been taking just north of Broome in WA. Alrighty. Before we get into the presentation, a little disclaimer. So this presentation is intended solely for educational purposes. The information provided is general awareness only. This content should not be construed as a guide, instruction manual for illegal activities. The presenter does not condone or encourage any unlawful behavior discussed herein. This is just to cover myself, and yeah, you never know. Like, I'm assuming most of you are like white hats, but so any grey heads or darker, please leave the room right now. So yeah, here we go. This is the present. It's behind the curtains of dark web and cybercrime operations. Why this presentation? So I want to do a deep dive into what happens after a hack, like once the funds are being paid after ransomware, how this money gets moved and how it gets laundered and all these things. This is a kind of combination of my personal experiences in the space over the last 4 years, from both a blockchain and a kind of normal Web2 cybersecurity kind of background. In the past, I've seen lots of misleading information or inaccurate information by general media or even cybersecurity outlets. Just gets to referred as, oh yeah, 10 Bitcoin got paid, and then it just went through a tumbler or a mixer, and happy days. It's a bit more nuanced than that. So yeah, I would like to raise awareness, hopefully inspire some of you to dig in deeper into this kind of stuff as well. As I feel like there hasn't been much like in-depth coverage. And I guess because that's where all the money is, I think the better we understand that space, the better we can combat that. As, you know, like we've tried it with patching, but ransomware still happens due to like silly vulnerabilities, right? So maybe if we hit them where it hurts the most, we might stand a chance. So who here owns any crypto? Anyone? Oh, not too many. That's perfect. Okay, that's really good. So we have no crypto bros because this is not a crypto bro presentation, which is really important to me to just clarify, because usually it's just like that investment BS, but I think there's huge value from a security point of view, and I'll try to make the case with this presentation. Anyway, as I mentioned before, it's all about crypto, so ransomware attacks, info stealers, scams, that's like the preferred payment method for the attackers. There's also blockchain hacks, but you're probably not too interested in that, but there's lots of money that gets stolen through that. I think that's something that affects all of us, because that money enters then criminal channels, and that money is usually not used to build hospitals or, I don't know, feed the poor, right? So it would be good if we can limit that. And also it's the go-to kind of way to exchange value in darknet marketplaces. So we'll touch upon that as well. Alrighty, so first things first, a quick note on operational security again, to try to get more people in the space. There's obviously different degrees of paranoia that you can have. I myself, I just want to balance it, convenience and how paranoid I am. I use a separate laptop. I just resurrected an old 2015 MacBook Pro, I think. If you got one of those, Linux Mint is really good and easy to install. Usually when I do my research, I have it air-gapped in the sense that I don't connect it to my home or work Wi-Fi, so it just separately, you can just use your phone to hotspot. That's how I like to do this. Heaps of alternatives. lots of you familiar with like tails or cubes. If you want to just have a quick look, I think just spinning up, I'll probably get a lot of stuff for that, but like also VMs is just another layer, just to quickly have a look. Then I keep my attack surface pretty low, so it just has Tor and a browser installed. Pick your poison with the browser. Tool-wise, you don't really need much. It's just more about knowing where to look, but a blockchain explorer will do. So one of the most famous ones is Etherscan for Ethereum blockchain. That's where a lot of these funds get moved on. But basically you can just Google, pick your blockchain name, and then explore on Google, and you'll find it right away. I like to do mostly passive research. I tend to not interact with anything, just to limit any potential downsides. Okay, so now we get into the meatier part of things. So I picked, I feel like slang, or you can call it primitives or whatever, things that we need to understand in the blockchain space to kind of understand how these funds get moved. First of all, the more general one is just the term Web3. So many people refer to that space as Web3. I won't go into the historical Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, but basically just synonym for blockchain technology. So the first primitive, let's call it for lack of better wording, wallet or address. So that's basically how you send the money, right? So just imagine that you're driving in your car, you have an origin address and a destination. So A sends to B. That's simply as that. Then what we refer to as chains. Chain is your blockchain, basically. It's just short for blockchain, and we have lots of different types of chains, and they interact with, and I'll just get into that shortly. Then we have the major chains. We call them L1s, layer ones. It's your Bitcoin, your Ethereum, like the big ones that you've heard. They were the first ones that kind of came out. And then we have L2s. So these big chains had inefficiencies. Could be speed, could be throughput. So people invented L2s. They still are based off the L1s, but they kind of live underneath, and they have certain performance improvements for one of those reasons that I mentioned. Smart contracts. This is a big one. I think the easiest way to understand it, it's simply the backend, right? Like you imagine your web app, you have your backend, right? So a smart contract is basically the same, but for the blockchain. So this is obviously an oversimplification, but again, the aim here is just to have a basic understanding of these, so then we can understand how the funds get moved. Then token. This is a very interesting concept. So we often get confused between coins and tokens. So you have the native ones. It's your Bitcoin. That's native to the L1, right? So that's what you use to use the L1. But you also have tokens. You see them everywhere, like they call them meme coins, whatever. Those are simply tokens within a smart contract. So imagine it's just simply an environment, like a variable, right? Like an integer. You can have token Peppy, and then, sorry, it's probably more like a vector, but to each person or address, there's a certain value. But that just lives in the smart contract, right? Which is kind of your backend server or backend application living on the chain. They can both live on L1s, L2s. We have also more than L2s, but for the purpose of this is plenty. And then, obviously, we have all these different layers. And if you have two different L1s or two different L2s that are not part of the same L1, you need to bridge somehow so they can talk as well. So they develop these protocols called bridges. Heaps of problems with them security-wise, but also heaps of problems tracing them because they have different protocols, different ways of working, creates complexity, which we'll see later. And now the crucial point of everything, exchanges. So the first one is the centralized exchanges, CXs. You've probably heard from them, of them, Binance, Coinbase. They do lots of marketing, so they're fairly famous. What makes them relevant for security purposes is KYC, so know your customer. That's required by those exchanges to identify who the people are interacting with those exchanges. The centralized ones usually don't do much on the blockchain. They just help consumers get the normal money, which we call fiat, your Aussie dollars, into crypto. Often nothing happens on the blockchain. They just are a middleman, like a kind of bank, right? But then because this is decentralized technology, we have decentralized exchanges. Like Uniswap, Curve, there's a gazillion, right? Over these, we have no influence whatsoever. They have no requirements for KYC, so we don't know who makes a transaction. They don't need to know. They just live on the blockchain, which makes it pretty tricky, we'll see. So what happens after a hack, right? So this is kind of, I just want to focus, like we all understand ransomware and whatnot. The payment gets made, 10 Bitcoin, let's say. What happens after that? So this is an oversimplification. This can be like crazy complex, but it kind of like gives the idea. So we have the first phase, layering, and the second phase, integration. So in the layering, we have two kind of sub-strategies that you can use. The first part is just scattering funds around. It's more like an obfuscation kind of thing. It's reversible, so you can figure it out, but it can get very complex. So for example, many of you probably know Lazarus, the threat actor. When they start, they spread the funds like 9,000 different wallets or addresses. So imagine if you're like investigating that, that's a big, big headache. The sole purpose, again, is just slowing down the investigation. It doesn't anonymize the transactions. Some of them are on the same chain. Some you bridge onto different chains. You swap tokens. And again, very hard to follow. Then we have a subpart of just pure anonymization. There's a few tools that can be used, though, that are well regarded within those spaces for anonymity. It's Tornado Cash. This is one of them. Pretty famous because the two developers that put it together initially, they got arrested by the FBI, I believe, for facilitating money laundering. This is kind of like the first sign to show if they can't reverse it, they usually go after the people that did it because it's kind of like out of control now. How that gets governed, it's a smart contract that lives on the blockchain. It was initially for Ethereum. I think now they have it on many chains. And how it works is you have fixed amounts of funds that you get in, like 0, 1 Ethereum, 1 Ethereum, whatever. You leave it inside the smart contract, and the longer the time you leave it in, the more other transaction comes, and you cannot determine on the other side what comes out. So basically you're breaking the trail, and that's a very good way to anonymize your funds. And this has been used by Lazarus in the past. I think once the size of the hacks get too big, it probably doesn't have enough volume inside to satisfy their needs. I think they did 1.5 billion hack recently, so that's quite a large amount of money. Then we have Monero. Also, Monero has privacy kind of built in, so you cannot trace the transactions. This is the go-to L1 or chain used by dark web and darknet marketplaces. It's kind of natively, they go straight to that. This is one interesting thing. I often see with ransomware, they ask for like Bitcoin and things like that. I don't really understand why. I guess because people are more used to that. But just since the victim buys it anyway, they could just ask for Monero, but they don't really do it. Another strong case why Monero seems to work, I'm not a cryptographer, so cannot testify or confirm how strong it is, but the European Union has banned it or is trying to ban it. So once the funds are there, pretty much impossible to trace back. And then last one, the ones we hear on the news, the mixers, the tumblers and all that stuff, that gets my blood boiling because it's really not what's used by the professional ones. Usually there's like smaller groups that don't have the expertise or just straight up noobs. What happens, the funds are not really anonymized, so either someone manages to reverse it, so you have law enforcement onto that, they reverse it and then they connect the trail, or they set up like hack it, take it down, they maybe have logs, it's a centralized group that runs those usually, so they just dismantle it from the inside, so hence that doesn't work. So every time you hear a big threat actor using mixers or tumblers, maybe they used it just to go through it, but it's not that gives them the anonymity or the money laundering capabilities. And now we get into the integration phase. I'm sure you remember the layering. So that's where we scatter around thousands of transactions, buy us time, make it hard to follow what's happening. That gives us time then to prepare the integration phase. Here we're going to divide it between threat actor size. So I'll call them small players and big players. Small player, small amounts of money, maybe up to $1 million US. I think you can get away with something like that. Like, don't quote me about that, but if they get like really big, they usually have a big infrastructure connected like to proper organized crime. And what they do to get away with this, and they stay natively on blockchain or with crypto. So as you can see from the chart, money comes in, they go through Tornado Cash or Monero, pick your poison, and they spend the money on chain, and that equals profit basically. So you have jurisdictions in the world like Argentina, for example, suffering from hyperinflation, so they make big use of crypto just to not lose money. So lots of like smaller businesses, just easier to spend that money. I think there's a little bit in Switzerland. There's like a few pockets in the world. So if you position yourself there, you can live off crypto. So that's one strategy they use. And that seems to work, but again, for smaller amounts, right? How do these guys also get caught as well? Is you can use Tornado Cash or Monero. The problem is, if you then use a centralized exchange, and there's been many instances of this, first of all, often there is KYC, or they have law enforcement tapping into that earlier, or they can see which bank account you extract the money. So basically, you go right to jail. The blacklisting that I mentioned, sometimes if a researcher or if a blockchain security company links a wallet to or an address to a hack, they can contact those centralized exchanges and they will then blacklist the funds. So again, less sophisticated threat actors could transfer to a centralized exchange thinking, oh, I'll quickly get it out. I have a compromised bank account. I can just get them out. But as soon as they transfer that, funds get blacklisted and they can recover that. So that's pretty cool. But I've only seen it work mostly for smaller threat actors. As I mentioned in the slides, law enforcement can get in. And what characterizes them is just they don't have the size and the connections, I guess, for like a proper international money laundering infrastructure. And here again, mixers straight to jail, guys. This is pointless. Anyway, so now we get to the big players. As you can see, it's a much simpler setup. It's like money, don't care, centralized exchange, profit. They don't care is a bit an oversimplification. It's not like they don't care. They scatter. They still don't want to be like with Lazarus. They often clean up the traces as well. I think it's more for like reputational reasons. Like they don't want to have North Korea like blatantly connected to this. So they're very clean when they operate. And I mention them so many times because they've just been leading the way from a criminal side of things, how you can get these funds, move them through blockchains, and just basically launder it almost completely. And they are very good at scattering, so the layering phase, they go crazy. So that stops the initial, like, the blacklisting things. It's very hard because they just expand. And whilst all the ones in the defending side are just trying to follow up, and probably hopefully by now you understand the complexity. So imagine you have all the L1s that kind of speak the same protocols, the same languages, but between L1s, there's big differences, right? So all the tools you have to kind of follow these are different or have like different nuances. Then you have bridges, decentralized exchanges that you can interact with to move it somewhere else. So every of these steps just makes it harder to follow. And they really take advantage of this complexity. So what I want you hopefully to take home is, yes, sure, everything on the blockchain is traceable, but because of the little nuances and the spreading of these things, it's so hard to follow back in like a timely manner, and they can just move so fast. And also, there's not many companies that have the resources to follow that, and it's not much interest as well. It's such a global phenomenon. That unfortunately they really succeed with this. So what they do is after the don't care phase, which they do care, as we just said. They go into centralized exchanges, surprise, surprise. But these centralized exchanges are being spun up in jurisdictions often that harbor these hackers or make a profit from them. So there's been instances in Russia, China, you name it. The centralized exchanges up. They transfer the funds. Obviously, like with Lazarus, if you have like 1.5 billion that you're laundering, like you don't go to just one exchange, right? You have a collection of them, but just take one for as an example. You send 10, 100 million there. And the exchange will come up with an excuse. There's been in the recent Bybit hack, if someone's been following that stuff. The exchange claimed they didn't know where the money was coming from. They weren't sure, so they let it go. And they basically laundered the money, and the incentive for the countries hosting those exchanges, because obviously they get fees from that, right? There's a maybe 2-3% commission. So if you let them pass through 100 million, and get 3%, it's a good business, and you probably have a few of those set up. So everyone makes money along the way, and the Western countries don't really have much influence, as you all know. We won't get into geopolitics now, but so that happens. The money gets converted into fiat, no more money, and then it enters the normal world, let's call it. And yeah, unfortunately, there's not much we can do around that. So, but yeah, surprise, as soon as you have this size, you go for centralized exchanges to take out the money. Interesting with dark web marketplaces, they are mostly natively on Monero. So the don't care phase is just basically Monero, and then they also enter this elaborate international money laundering schemes, and then it goes from there. So what's next? This was hopefully just a representation of what's happening right now. I haven't come up with answers how we can stop this. My idea is just to raise awareness of how this is working based on threat actor size. Hopefully have a bit of understanding of how it really works. I hope more research in the space will help this. Technical solutions, it's really hard because of the different chains, the nuances, and some of that stuff like Tornado Cash, once it's an independent smart contract, like you can't take it down. That's by design of these chains, right? So hard to do. I think we can crack down on centralized exchanges. I think having KYC, know your customer, really helps prevent or actually get these people. Political pressure potentially. But yeah, it's a bit open-ended. But yeah, thank you very much. I would love your feedback as well. If you're interested, have more questions, feel free to connect with me, and thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Do we have any questions?
I think there was one over there. Oh, yeah.
What's your opinion on stuff like what Chainalysis is doing, where they're undermining some of the security that's in Monero? What do you think with how that balances like normal users' privacy versus the need to actually find these threat actors and potentially recover this large amount of money?
That's a $1 million question, right? So it was built by these visionaries, right, that wanted unlimited privacy. To be honest, the real world use case for that is very limited. I don't know anyone that really uses, apart from like a few paranoid mates, that just don't even have social media or anything. It's mostly like for organized crime and gambling. That's unfortunately how I see it. Even those big companies, they make very big claims. I had a look. I often struggle to see the full connection on their reports and stuff. There's been smaller researchers that have done good stuff. I think you can trace it to a certain extent, but as soon as you bridge, probably like Bitcoin, Ethereum, it's not too hard. But once you move into Monero or do lots of bridging, move through decentralized exchanges, you have anonymity. So if you know what you're doing, you can be fairly anonymous. Yeah. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you for your talk. I just have a very mundane but very prevalent question. From the recent specific spear phishing or mutated attacks that's been targeted to steal your private keys that is usually associated to wallet. So from your experiences working in this space,
What's that?
from your experiences working in this space, do you consider that crypto attached to your normal blockchains or exchanges, for instance, like Binance or Coinbase, they would be more secure in terms of because there are no wallets that people are hosting onto their browser versus somebody who is just using a digital wallet and being a part of these attack campaigns where their private keys are compromised and then they lose access to large amount of crypto, for instance.
So just to rephrase the question, so you're asking if using a centralized exchange is safer than self-custody, just having your own keys?
Yes, because of the recent threat campaigns we have seen for the largest corporation, for instance, these are very specific design threat campaigns that will look for transition or man in the middle where the addresses are being sifted. This seems more prone to specific attacks and very targeted because they are not like willy-nilly campaigns for credential compromise, for instance. So
I think that goes, like with everything in security, you got to do your threat model, kind of like understand what your risks are. We had lots of centralized exchanges being hacked themselves. So it's kind of like, do you want to assume that risk of managing your keys or you want to outsource that? There's pros and cons. You've seen attacks on centralized exchanges, same as what you're mentioning now. I feel like it goes like in waves. There's a really cool tool having multi-sig wallets, so you need multiple signatures to let the transaction go. So even if one gets compromised, you still need at least one more signer to confirm the transaction. So that's what they use like for kind of like bigger amounts of assets. But yeah, to answer your questions, it depends. It depends on it. But I wouldn't have stuff in your browser where you do like security research or download all sorts of Chrome plugins, right?
appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries.
Excellent. Let's give a round of applause to Alexander again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.